The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a complex and enduring struggle with deep historical roots. It centers on competing claims to the same territory, a situation with consequences for millions of people. Understanding the conflict requires a look back at the key events and milestones that have shaped it. In the early 20th century, the land now encompassing Israel and the Palestinian territories was part of the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, the area came under British control, with the Balfour Declaration of 1917 expressing British support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. This declaration, while vague in its wording, had profound implications, setting the stage for increased Jewish immigration to the region. This, in turn, led to growing tensions with the Arab population already residing there. Following World War II and the Holocaust, the United Nations voted in 1947 to partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. This partition plan was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab leaders, and fighting broke out almost immediately. In 1948, Israel declared its independence, which triggered a war with neighboring Arab states. This war resulted in Israel's victory and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. The 1967 Six-Day War led to Israel's capture of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, and Golan Heights. This victory further solidified Israel's control over the region, but also fueled tensions. The occupation of these territories and the continued expansion of Israeli settlements remain major points of contention to this day. The decades that followed witnessed numerous attempts to resolve the conflict, including the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, which aimed for a two-state solution. However, these efforts ultimately failed to achieve a lasting peace. The situation remains volatile, marked by periods of violence, including the Second Intifada and several wars in Gaza. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is often characterized by differing narratives and deeply held grievances on both sides. Understanding these perspectives is crucial for any attempt at reconciliation. For Israelis, the establishment of a Jewish state was seen as a vital necessity after centuries of persecution and the horrors of the Holocaust. They view Israel as a haven and a guarantee of security for the Jewish people. Many Israelis believe they have a historical and religious right to the land, citing biblical connections and archaeological evidence. They also point to the constant threat of terrorism and the hostility of neighboring states as justification for their security measures, which Palestinians often view as oppressive. Palestinians, on the other hand, see the conflict as a struggle for self-determination and an end to occupation. They experienced dispossession and displacement during the 1948 war and subsequent events, and they continue to live under Israeli control in the West Bank and Gaza. Palestinians view Israeli settlements as illegal land grabs and a major obstacle to peace. They also face restrictions on movement and access to resources, which they see as discriminatory and unjust. Many Palestinians yearn for a state of their own, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the right of return for refugees and their descendants. Both sides harbor deep wounds and mistrust, stemming from decades of violence and broken promises. The lack of a shared historical narrative further complicates matters, with each side interpreting events through their own lens of suffering and victimhood. Beyond the political and historical complexities, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has had a devastating impact on the lives of ordinary people. The human cost of this enduring struggle is immeasurable, marked by violence, displacement, and a perpetual cycle of suffering. The conflict has claimed the lives of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians, both combatants and civilians. Terrorist attacks, military operations, and cycles of retaliation have left families shattered and communities torn apart. The psychological scars of violence run deep, affecting generations and perpetuating a climate of fear and mistrust. The Palestinian territories, particularly Gaza, face a dire humanitarian situation. Blockades, restrictions on movement, and damaged infrastructure have led to widespread poverty, unemployment, and limited access to essential services like healthcare and clean water. The ongoing conflict has also hampered economic development and deprived Palestinians of opportunities to build a better future. The international community has responded with humanitarian aid and diplomatic efforts, but a lasting solution remains elusive. The plight of Palestinian refugees, many of whom live in overcrowded camps with limited prospects, remains a pressing concern. Addressing the humanitarian crisis is not only a moral imperative, but also essential for creating an environment conducive to peace. Despite the seemingly intractable nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the pursuit of peace remains a vital necessity. Achieving a just and lasting resolution requires overcoming numerous challenges, but the human cost of continued conflict demands unwavering commitment to dialogue and reconciliation. One of the primary obstacles to peace is the lack of trust between the two sides. Decades of violence, broken promises, and failed negotiations have created a deep chasm of suspicion and animosity. Bridging this divide requires genuine efforts at empathy, understanding, and a willingness to address past grievances. Another challenge lies in the complexities of the issues at stake. The status of Jerusalem, the fate of Palestinian refugees, the question of settlements, and the borders of a future Palestinian state are all highly sensitive topics with no easy answers. Finding solutions that address the needs and aspirations of both sides will require creativity, flexibility, and a willingness to compromise. Despite the challenges, there are glimmers of hope. Civil society organizations on both sides are working tirelessly to promote dialogue, understanding, and reconciliation. International actors can play a constructive role by providing incentives for peace, supporting confidence-building measures, and holding parties accountable for violations of international law. Ultimately, a sustainable peace can only be achieved through direct negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. While the road ahead is fraught with obstacles, the pursuit of a just and lasting solution is essential for the well-being of both peoples and the stability of the region.